Ukraine's allies have agreed to provide multi-layered international defense guarantees at a key summit in Paris.
European leaders defend Greenland's sovereignty after US presidential aide ramped up Trump's threats.
The European Commission is proposing an additional 45 billion euros to help farmers to convince EU member states opposed to a trade agreement with Mercosur.
Ukraine's allies have agreed to provide multi-layered international defense guarantees at a key summit in Paris on Tuesday. Leaders from Europe and Canada met with U.S. representatives, as well as top EU and NATO officials and Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky. Allies will participate in U.S.-led monitoring and verification of any ceasefire, support the long-term provision of armaments for Ukraine's defense, and work toward binding commitments to support Ukraine in the case of any future attack by Russia.
Deutschland wird sich weiter politisch, finanziell und eben auch militärisch einbringen. Dazu kann zum Beispiel gehören, dass wir nach einem Waffenstillstand Kräfte für die Ukraine auf benachbartem NATO-Gebiet einmelden.
The size of the supporting forces was not made public, and many of the plan's details remain unclear.
We heard President Zelensky and some of the other people here talking about land options. That will be the most critical issue, and we're going to be continuing on with those discussions, and hopefully we'll be able to meet or come up with certain compromises with regard to that.
Найбільше питання, що потрібно ще працювати, це питання територіальне. Ми обговорили деякі ідеї, які можуть допомогти. Якщо команди не зможуть вирішити деякі питання, можна виносити це питання на рівень лідерів.
Zelensky said progress was made in the talks, although commitments need to be ratified by each country so that they can be put in place after any settlement. Russian forces launched dozens of drones into Ukraine overnight on Tuesday, targeting several regions, according to Ukraine's Air Force. It said 53 drones were shot down, while another 8 managed to hit their targets, including in the Kherson, Zaporizhia, and Sumy regions. In Kherson, apartment buildings were damaged in a strike on a residential neighborhood. Regional authorities reported one person was killed in Kherson over the past day. Another person was killed in Zaporizhia and one more in Donetsk, they added. Meanwhile, Ukrainian forces launched long-range strikes into Russia, hitting an ammunition and an oil facility in the Russian regions of Lipetsk and Kostroma, according to Ukraine's security service. Ukraine has escalated its strike campaign against oil facilities inside Russia and Russian-occupied territories throughout 2025, as oil and gas are key sources of revenue for Moscow's war against Ukraine.
European leaders have defended Greenland's sovereignty after US presidential aide Stephen Miller ramped up Trump's threat to annex the autonomous territory, which is part of the Kingdom of Denmark. In an interview with CNN on Monday, Trump's deputy chief of staff for policy said it was Washington's position that Greenland should be part of the US. Miller also questioned Denmark's right to control Greenland and said there was no need to even think or talk about a military operation in the Arctic island, as nobody is going to fight the US militarily over the future of Greenland. Meanwhile, leaders of 6 European nations, Denmark, France, Germany, Italy, Poland, Spain and the UK, issued a joint statement on Tuesday defending Greenland's sovereignty. Greenland belongs to its people, said the statement. It is for Denmark and Greenland and them only to decide on matters concerning Denmark and Greenland. Greenland has been under Danish control since the early 18th century, but gained home rule in 1979, although Copenhagen continues to oversee its foreign and security policy.
The European Commission is proposing an additional 45 billion euros to help farmers. In a letter published on Tuesday, the president of the institution put this additional funding on the table as part of the CAP, the Common Agricultural Policy. But with this announcement, Ursula von der Leyen is above all trying to convince EU member states opposed to a trade agreement with the Latin American countries of Mercosur. The EU chief hopes to overcome the reluctance of farmers in France, Italy and Poland, who fear an influx of cheap products such as beef, chicken and sugar. The move is intended to convince Rome in particular, whose vote would secure a qualified majority among the 27 member states. The vote could take place on Friday. If given the green light, Ursula von der Leyen could then travel to Paraguay early next week to sign the trade agreement, which would eliminate 90% of customs duties.
Fire safety inspections hadn't been carried out for 5 years at the Le Constellation bar in the Swiss Alps town of Crans-Montana, where a fire killed 40 people and left more than 100 injured during a New Year's Eve party. Investigators said they believe sparklers on top of champagne bottles ignited the fire when they came too close to the ceiling. A resurfaced video from a 2019 New Year's Eve celebration at the same bar shows the dangers posed by the soundproofing foam on the ceiling may have been known for a long time. In the video, an employee is heard warning customers as they carried bottles with the same sparklers believed to be responsible for the deadly fire. Mayor Nicolas Ferraud told a press conference on Tuesday that the last inspection was done in 2019 and couldn't immediately explain why they hadn't been carried out since then. Authorities are looking into whether soundproofing material on the ceiling complied with regulations and whether the candles were permitted for use in the bar. Swiss authorities have opened a criminal investigation into the bar managers. The two are suspected of involuntary homicide, involuntary bodily harm, and involuntarily causing a fire.
The United States faced fierce criticism at an emergency UN Security Council session on Monday over Washington's recent intervention in Venezuela. The backlash was expected in what was a bold assertive action by the Trump administration to militarily topple and capture Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro on Saturday. But the precedent the move sets has even U.S. allies concerned with what future global relations could look like.
No state should seek to influence political outcomes in Venezuela through the use or threat of force or through other means inconsistent with international law.
The United Kingdom reaffirms its commitment to international law and the principles enshrined in the Charter of the United Nations. These foundations are essential for maintaining global peace, security, and the rule of law.
Venezuela slammed the intervention and called for the immediate release of Maduro and his wife Celia Flores.
En este sentido, solicitamos, primero, que se exija al gobierno de los Estados Unidos de América el respeto pleno de las inmunidades del presidente Nicolás Maduro y de la primera dama Celia Flores, así como su liberación inmediata y su retorno seguro a Venezuela.
Foes of Washington's presented a hardline stance against what they called cynical crimes committed in Caracas.
Для преступления, цинично совершенного Соединенными Штатами в Каракасе, нет и не может быть никаких оправданий. Решительно осуждаем акт вооруженной агрессии Соединенных Штатов.
The U.S., however, remained defiant, backing its military action and defending it as legal and legitimate.
President Trump gave diplomacy a chance. He offered Maduro multiple off-ramps. He tried to de-escalate. Maduro refused to take them. President Trump made it clear that the narco-terrorism must stop, and yet it continued. The United States will not waver in our actions to protect Americans from the scourge of narco-terrorism and seeks peace.
Maduro is currently being held in New York, where he faces trial on charges of narco-terrorism. He made his first appearance in a Manhattan courthouse on Monday, where he pled not guilty.
A strong earthquake shook western Japan on Tuesday, but no major damage or life-threatening injuries were reported. But according to the Fire and Disaster Management Agency, there were several reports of minor injuries. There was no risk of a tsunami from the inland quake, centered about 10 kilometers deep, authorities said. According to the Japan Meteorological Agency, the magnitude 6.4 quake struck in the Shimane Prefecture in northwestern Japan, the prefectural capital of Matsue, and nearby cities, including some in neighboring Tottori Prefecture, were among the most strongly shaken. Authorities also announced delays and suspension of bullet trains in the region. Japan sits on the Pacific Ring of Fire, an area of seismic faults surrounding the Pacific Ocean, one of the world's most earthquake-prone regions.
Orthodox Christians across Europe are closing off the Christmas season with celebrations of Epiphany. The holiday marks the baptism of Jesus by John the Baptist and is celebrated in different ways by Orthodox Christian communities. Some Western Christian churches know the feast as Three Kings Day, recalling the visit of the three wise men to the infant Jesus and their sense of wonder at the encounter. In some places, such as Greece and Turkey, the celebration involves swimmers competing to retrieve a wooden cross thrown by a priest into the water. In Bulgaria's celebration, men entered the icy waters of the Tunja River, accompanied by bagpipers and drummers to perform the traditional horo dance. Romanian villagers gathered on the pastures of the southern village of Pietrasani with their horses to receive blessings from a priest. They drank plum brandy and mulled wine and ate grilled spicy sausages to celebrate the feast. The holiday also marked the end of the Vatican's 2025 Holy Year, a year-long celebration that saw some 33 million pilgrims flock to Rome. After a prayer at the Holy Door of St. Peter's Basilica, Pope Leo pulled the two doors shut, symbolically closing out the Jubilee.